Good evening, sports fans. My name is Crobat for the win. I am joined here today with...
What is up, all of you GBA type people? I have not spoke into this microphone right here, and I can't tell you how long, but it's great to be here.
It's great to have you, Tom. So, we're here for our in-between GBA Season 10, Week 8, and Week 9 matches. And due to the delay with the new DLC coming out, a lot of bots for PK hexing teams were down, so we wanted to give you guys some good content, even though there will not be any games put up today. So for today, we're going to be doing a look to the playoffs. We'll call it a little playoff podcast, if you will. So we'll discuss the standings and some general impressions from each of the teams over the season, and see what the likelihood of each of the teams to get into the playoffs.
Yeah, I think so. This season overall, obviously you guys did a great job with making this an excellent reboot of what was the GBA from its roots, which I know you and I can both talk about being part of that very first season and really putting into motion Steve's idea with what he wanted from the GBA and how it's developed and flourished, and of course other things as well in time, right, leading into what's happened a few seasons ago, the change in a lot of the timers, and how leagues were essentially dead for a while. But you guys did a great job bringing it back. That being said, the coaches you've brought in, the matches I've been able to watch, because I may have not been talking here on the forend, but I've been able to watch matches and watch how a lot of these coaches have been not only innovative, but creative, entertaining, and overall just a great watch from top to bottom. You've had teams like Uzi, who's pretty much been unstoppable from the get-go. You know, his team has been probably, no, not probably, definitely the best team that's been out there. It's pretty much him and everyone else, so it'd be impressive to see how far he can go. But then, of course, you got the guys like Lars, who are coming back, and even Goldoa, who know their stuff about how the GBA functions and their teams, and they're super reliable, super steady coaches, right? PME has been my favorite team to watch because they're just entertaining as all anything. The Victinis and the Dragapults, Coilers, all those teams, like the new guys, the Flamethrowers, the Weaviles, the Snugglers, and the Sawsbucks, all those teams, despite them how new they are, all putting up excellent content. I know I talked a lot there if you want to chime in.
Yeah, no, definitely. And it's been good to have some old timers coming back. You mentioned Goldoa and
George,
and George, yeah. So this for San Francisco, it's been great to have them back. And you know what? One thing I've noticed too throughout the season is we've had a lot of coaches with some ups and downs. You know, a couple win streaks here, losing streaks here. Lars was another one, obviously, who's coming back. He certainly went through a few losses early season, but has started to rebound back, which, you know what? Awesome for him. Also, even some of the teams down at the bottom, everyone's been fighting, and everyone's put in a lot of heart into their games. Right. I really think that's one of the things that's made this season so much fun and so, you know, broadly successful, because you have everyone trying to have a good time, you know, regardless of standings, which I think was also enforced by the new ranking system for
absolutely
for you know, top 12. It's more NHL style, obviously, is
right.
Kind of how we've been doing it. The old way we used to do differential is very different than running it with points. And I feel like it gives people who, you know, might have had a couple tough weeks, it gives them more of a chance to be in the playoffs. And that's why I think we're seeing certain teams still, you know, in the top, I'll say 8, despite some really tough losses along the way.
Yeah, and I'm sure you can hearken to what I'm about to say. But do you remember how you felt when you'd have a really bad loss, you get swept, you get blown out 4 or 5-0, and you watch your differential be like, I don't know, 7 or 11, and then it all drops to almost 0 or negative, and you're like, well, how am I going to get out of that hole for the rest of the season?
Yeah, no, absolutely. That is a very, very common memory of mine. I've thought about that many times, and in designing this season, we really wanted to mitigate that feeling as much as we could for coaches, so no coach felt like like they'd be so down after a week. I always described it as, especially after getting like 5-0 or something, do I even want to put my stats on the board this week? You know,
Right.
That's how I've always thought about it. And the idea of not losing points, I think, is a good way to keep coach retention. So that way people don't get so discouraged. It encourages a little bit more fun.
Right. Instead of putting, 0-5 or 0-6 on your stat page and then seeing that negative differential, you're just putting you might just put 0-1 or 0-1 or 1-1 on your stat, like your actual stats for that match. It definitely kind of lessened the blow. Yeah, it still was a little bitter, but like you said, the change I'm all for. The old system worked; it served its purpose, right? Created a framework, but this new style, as well as the bonus points, have been awesome. I know that following a lot of the bonus points, because I've been watching in the background, just doing like stat checking and all that. It's been cool seeing like what Pokemon have gotten more sweeps than others, how Pokemon have been surviving, or even the times where you'll see a Pokemon live on like 6 or 7 or 8 HP, and it's like just off that 5 or under to get that point.
I've really liked the idea of the bonus points and trying to keep track of them. Certainly, I think we could do a little more exploration with it in the future, and maybe we're always open to new ideas on how to adapt them and maybe come up with some different stuff. If you have some ideas, feel free to leave them in the comments. Like we're always down to look at stuff like that. But it's been fun to see how certain teams have been able to use them. A team that comes to mind is actually George, SceptileMC, the San Francisco Arcaniners. The dude just keeps getting bonus points, despite maybe the middling record. He has gotten so many bonus points this season that he is still technically in reasonable playoff contention, and we'll cover that in a little bit. I'll speak to each of the teams and kind of where they stand. But the dude just knows how to get bonus points. I don't know how he does it.
The thing that stands out in my head about George and getting bonus points is some of his matches when, I forgot who he was playing, but his Chi-Yu, I believe his Chi-Yu, or maybe it was Volcarona, lived on like a sliver, and he had clicked a move, and the Pokemon had lived, and he'd be like, oh, he lived, and then he gets hit, and he goes, I lived! I really enjoyed that. I mean, not only do I like how the bonus points are keeping coaches in the running overall, but I also like how some of the coaches are looking at some of these top tier threats, right? You could point at things like Roaring Moon or Iron Bundle. You could look at a lot of the newer Pokemon and how dangerous they are with the Terra Crystals and how offensively outstanding they are when it comes to team building, right? But also the innovation that it takes from some of the coaches to make sets that work and then mitigate those threats, right? I'm going to talk about just Endeavor, right? The Endeavor Cloth against, I want to say Snugglers? Maybe I'm wrong there. Or maybe it was the Atlanta Victini. But using Cloth to pretty much turn the tide of the battle, or how Donphan was used with Endeavor to then pretty much reversal the Ursaluna, not the move reversal, but basically take the Ursaluna and make it not a threat. That to me was super impressive. I appreciate that really in-depth team building, because a lot of that reminds me of previous seasons where you looked at things and had to really become creative on team building, right? You're Gyarados or Thunderbolt Gyarados, right? Me 1v1ing a Rotom against Dan and A-Drive with a Starmie, like things you don't expect work, and that's so cool to me.
It was actually Fire Blast Gyarados.
Okay, I'm sorry, okay?
I think so I had that on Redbubble too, and I think I have sold a grand total of like 5 stickers in my life, so shout out to all those people who have Fire Blast Gyarados stickers.
I sold 2 shirts.
Yeah, so it's very important to me. It's still my banner. Anyway, but no, really good points there, and it'll be interesting to see where the bonus points goes in the future, and how it can be expanded and included in a competitive sphere. And I don't know, I think there's something cool about being the first league to try something like this. And how about the assistant coaches too? There really hasn't been a league that's formally introduced it in this type of way. I think that just creates a really cool new dynamic.
Yeah, for sure. And I say that because, I mean, I'm going to use someone like Joey, for example, right? The dude makes shout outs to whomever it is that helped him mock, which he mocks like a madman for a good reason, obviously. But you look at coaches that utilize the skills and the talent and the team building of other people and relies on a group and how that is beneficial. But in this situation, like, I'm sure, or at least I hope, and I'm sure you do too, that they're just relying on their assistant coach to kind of fill in the gaps to what they may not be as strong in, or to reinforce what they might be good at to, you know, make a good, competent team and then get a victory any given week.
Yeah, definitely. And that, I think that's also why it's been really good to have the coaches be able to obviously select their assistant coaches, because if there are certain weaknesses or weak areas that they know someone else is good in, then bring them on board. That's perfect for it. And maybe certain matchups within the rules, of course, they feel comfortable that their assistant coach can take care of the game against, you know, someone. Maybe, heck, you know, we all have certain people that we just always do well against. I still have never lost to Gubs from season 1, if you recall that. Like, just
right.
I will go against him right now. I haven't actually played a Pokemon match in years, and I'd probably still win just because of the memes. Broader point, we all have those people that we just do really well against. So you know what? I'm putting in my assistant coach a week because I know he or she does really well against my opponent.
Right.
It creates that new dynamic.
Hey man, you could ask Gubs for a run back. He is in the fan server. I mean, shout outs to the fan server.
See, it would be easier if I owned the game. Obviously, not dissing him at all. I remember our time, obviously, in GBA Season 1 and 2 very fondly, so it's more just a meme. Yeah, I think we've done a good job of just kind of covering the overall purview of the season so far, and obviously it's only been 8 weeks. We still got 2 left, and then a few of playoffs. Should be wrapping up sometime around Halloween, and we'll know who the GBA champion is. So I'd love to jump in and kind of take a look at the standings here, and maybe let's talk about each of the coaches and relative to what their likelihood of making the playoffs is at this point. So for rankings, right now they're on the screen for you. At the bottom, last place, we have the San Diego Snugglers, which currently have 6 points. So just I've off to the side kind of done some potential math on what point total all the teams could get to, so I can make some of these assumptions. Some assumptions I've made are: do they get two small wins, 2 big wins, or 1 small win, 1 big win, and 2 bonus points, and then a pretty extreme 2 big wins and 5 bonus points in the final 2 weeks, just to govern what I'm about to say. So back to San Diego. So they have 6 points. I've basically considered them mathematically eliminated. Technically, if they had 2 big wins in their final weeks, they got every bonus point under the sun, and everyone above them in the top 6 basically just collapsed. They might have a slight, tiny chance of sneaking into 6th place. So I can't officially say they are mathematically eliminated. Nobody is truly mathematically eliminated for this reason, but it would require an act of God to get them into the playoffs. They should really, if they needed a strategy to try to see if they could salvage it and come to the playoffs, they need to get as many bonus points as they can and obviously win.
Yeah, I think it's funny because you're not out of it, but you know, obviously it's a long season, so unfortunately a big loss or two, or one of those matches where you kind of just only accumulate, or you don't accumulate any points, or maybe you're just getting a run through of like maybe a point from something living when you're behind. Yeah, it sucks. It adds up. But you look at the bottom of the standings. I mean, the teams that have 6, 7, and 8 points, you said the Snugglers are kind of feeling it right now, but some of those teams, maybe they don't catch up, but maybe they don't let other teams run away with it. Because, I mean, Calgary, Copenhagen, even the Weaviles, they have fewer points than everyone else. Doesn't mean they're out of it, or at least doesn't mean that they can't stop trying, which has kind of been the overarching theme that I've seen this whole season. Is maybe a coach is having a bad time or struggling, doesn't mean they quit. They keep pressing, they keep trying, and maybe they do come up with some really good ideas to win themselves or ruin someone else's day.
Absolutely. And good segue into talking about the next 2 teams, which are tied with 7 points right now. So we do have Copenhagen in 11th and Calgary in 10th technically, because Calgary has 3 wins, whereas Copenhagen has 2. But they're pretty much in the same boat here, given that they have the same amount of points. They pretty much are in the same spot as San Diego, essentially mathematically eliminated, but through crazy events, it is possible that they could theoretically sneak their way back in. They both should really try to lean into bonus points, anything they can to get something to live under 5, you know, maybe get a sweep, something like that, and win their home games, prioritize those a lot, and I think that's their only road to the playoffs at this point. Next up, so we kind of have another tier. I'd consider the next 2 guys up are sort of on the outside looking in. They're looking at a possible comeback, but it's definitely an uphill battle. They're going to require bonus points and probably need some teams to lose in the top 6. So we have Wolverhampton Weaviles at 8 points. Obviously, they're in a more precarious position compared to San Francisco. Arcaniners, George, he has 11. 11 is definitely closer to in the hunt, but technically 8's slightly better off than the 3 teams below with 6 and 7 points. That extra bonus point actually made a reasonable difference in my math, but really it would be just looking more to George of those 2 with 11 points. If he can knock out 2 wins, even let's just say the dude has the ability to get bonus points. Let's say he can get 1 small win and 1 big win, and say 2 bonus points, and that might be too few. He could probably get more, knowing his luck. He's looking at 18 points on the season. So with enough luck for the people who are in 3rd through 6th, if they don't get too many more points, he could sneak right in there. So
absolutely,
definitely still, outside looking in, definitely still in it. He has only 2 wins this season, but once again, those bonus points keeping him alive, so major kudos to him.
And look, if there's anyone that can score bonus points but also adjust to to his situation, it's George. We watched it in the past, and yes, we can both recognize that he's had struggles this season getting used to the new meta, or how the Terra Captain works, or not having 2 fire types in the same team. That was a big thing. George is capable of moving up. Even the Coilers also able to move up and to really challenge these top 6 teams. Look, once you're in the dance and you're in the playoffs, doesn't matter. Everyone's back to 0. It's win or you're out. So just getting into the top half to get into playoffs, that's what matters.
Yeah, for sure. And once again, another good segue. You mentioned the Coilers. So they're currently placed in 7th with 14 points. And I consider this, honestly, they're in their own separate category right now. I call them on the cusp. They're so
on the outside looking in.
Yeah, even more outside looking in. They are close on the cusp there. Some big wins and bonus points, or some losses by some folks in the top 6 would definitely give them a decent size opening, I think. The key word there is or. If some of the folks in the top 6 get some wins, but they're just, a 2-point small win, but the Coilers also get maybe a big win and a couple bonus points, they'll leapfrog right over them with 14 points. They're in okay standing. They don't need other people to lose, but they need other people to win small or lose, I guess. So that's why the distinction between them and the Arcaniners. I think San Francisco Arcaniners need people to lose, whereas the Coilers would have a chance at the playoffs if some people won small, and they kept winning.
Oh yeah, for sure. So compared to the Arcaniners, they don't need someone. The Arcaniners need someone to lose and them to win in a way that moves them up, versus the Coilers at least can just rely on just winning themselves and possibly just sneaking right in there.
Absolutely, a bonus point would help. Some big wins would help. But it is, heck, if they just get 2 small wins, and that's it, so, plus 4 points on the season to get 18, but you get a couple of those teams that are above. Obviously, we have Chicago, Atlanta, Playmore Esports, and New York Empoleon from 16 and 15 points respectively. If some of those teams just don't get wins, they could sneak right up in there. So there's still a few ways they could get in there. If the teams in the top 6 tend to do pretty well, and the Coilers even if they do a split decision and they go 1-1, their odds are probably not great, So I do think the Coilers need to win the rest of the games to have a high likelihood of making it, but they don't necessarily need to have everyone lose, which is, you know what, it's a better place to be for your destiny than needing people to lose. Right.
So then working that into the next group, right, the teams that are kind of like 15, 16 points, right, you got the Dragapults, the Victinis, the Playmore Esports, and the Empoleon, right? Of them, it's basically they control your own destiny, right? Just win, you get in, right? Don't let anyone from behind overtake you, and just handle your business and then get into playoffs, because they may not overcome the top 2 teams based on point differential, and if they do, that's even better for them to get the bye, or otherwise get a better matchup if they can. But just getting in and just controlling your own wins, that's what matters, right? That's what you're gonna say, yeah?
Oh, absolutely. No, that's some good stuff. Yeah, that middle group there, they just need to win, and even winning small, like I just said, with 2 small wins, plus 4 points on the 2 weeks, that may not be enough. So for them to feel fully safe, I'd really like to see them get a few bonus points. All those teams would really, or get a couple big wins. That would also really help. It's possible too, depending on how things shake out, that some of those teams could afford to lose 1 game and still just barely make the playoffs. But once again, that's a huge domino effect to have to assess. I would say minimally, Chicago, Atlanta, Playmore Esports, and New York and Empoleon need to win minimally 1 game to have a chance at the playoffs. If they lose both, they're almost certainly out.
Yeah, absolutely. And then you got the last 2.
Yeah, so it's placing... So the number 2 is obviously Lars and the Borussia Donphan. Tough to place them. I kind of place them more in the, like, currently in the playoffs, but not totally safe range, but they're definitely of that group with Chicago, Atlanta, Playmore Esports, and New York and Empoleon. They're definitely the closer to the safest. Obviously, they have the most points. They have 18. But if they don't perform in the last few weeks, they could definitely drop down. They could go to, like, outside looking in, even 7th place, you know, if things really fall apart for them. I think all they have to do is win 1 game, and they're almost guaranteed to be somewhere in the playoffs. They might not have the bye week, but as you said, just getting in the playoffs, everybody's 0-0. The bye week's not a big deal.
In some cases, I feel like a bye week kind of becomes a detriment. Yeah, it's nice to reset, take that break, maybe use it to reset your mindset, or just to have that 1 week breather. But sometimes, you know, a team is just so hot and on top of their own game that having that 1 week layoff kind of really could cool them down in terms of preparation, because they don't know who they're playing until they see the match themselves, or at least see the score sheet, right? So what if some coaches do better going from end of season into the first round of playoffs, into the second round of playoffs, and finally to a championship, versus having that bye week and then taking that complete cool down week, not knowing what you're going to do until the match results are provided to you, and then you find out who you're playing. So who knows? It's a double-edged sword, but the bye weeks help. Sometimes they don't, though.
Yeah, it depends on who the coach is, and you know what? I don't know how these coaches would feel getting the bye week. I'd like to think on paper everyone would think they're great, but I mean, just ask like the Patriots many times when they've lost after getting a bye week, or you know, any other team in sports, right? So
sure,
it happens. It happens. So, and finally, the absolute dominant force this season, the Bullet Punch Club, TheUzigunner. I mean, he's virtually a lock on the playoffs here. Exact position would kind of depend on the final 2 weeks. If for some reason he just tanked hard and lost both games, no bonus points, I still think with 23 points, there is very little chance he would get out of the playoffs. That would be a huge drop. I mean, just by some of the napkin math that I did on the side, it would require a lot of the teams below him to have big wins and lots of bonus points, for even with 2 losses, for him to get out of the way and not make the playoffs. Now, he absolutely could lose the bye. If he wins both games, he gets the bye guaranteed, I think. But if he loses a game or both, he would maybe not get the bye.
Yeah, and to his credit, if there's anyone who's been able to really hone in the power and the creativity of their own team, it's been Uzi and of course his assistant coach MattyBrollic, you know, the way that they're able to keep Meowscarada from ever getting KO'd, or utilizing the Azumarill, the Goldungo, the Dragonite as the Terra Captain. That team from top to bottom has options, and it has ways to slow down their opponent, but also just impose their will offensively onto other coaches. And according to my stat book, I think they're the coach that has had the most mons brought that never touched the field, right? Because looking at it week to week, a lot of coaches, I mean, obviously everything will be brought or touch the field. So Uzi really has had sets where he may have showed it off in his team breakdowns, but never actually had to rely on all 6 members. And I think that kind of is cool, because you haven't seen in a lot of situations his whole mindset or his whole preparation, because he hasn't had to go ahead and do that. You know, you've seen sweeps, you've seen defensive battles won, and you've seen cleanups with Meowscarada at the end. So it's been cool. Yeah. I've enjoyed watching it.
Absolutely. And while I do think any one of the coaches have a reasonable chance at winning the championship, I think it's Uzi's for the taking if he wants. Like, if he performs at his absolute best, it's his to lose.
Agreed. Yeah, absolutely.
So I think one final section I want to just make sure we discuss too, so MVP races, because this could have some implications regarding points. So as a reminder to everybody, offensive MVP, the team that has the mon that gets the highest KDR, or kill to death ratio, gets a bonus point at the end of the season, and it could matter. We'll cover that in a sec. And the essentially, I'll call it defensive MVP, the highest games appeared to deaths ratio also gets a bonus point. So going into offensive MVP, we have Meowscarada, Iron Valiant, Roaring Moon, Dragapult, Iron Bundle, and Ceruledge all kind of fighting for that top spot, but it's really Bullet Punch Club's Meowscarada right now that's definitely has a solid lead, so it's 13 points. But Iron Valiant, Roaring Moon, they're really in it. I mean, remember we just said the Coilers EDC, we just said that they're basically on the cusp. If they can somehow get Valiant to get a bunch of KOs and leapfrog ahead of Meowscarada, that would really help them. That 1 point alone puts them tied with the New York Empoleon, and now all of a sudden it's a new ball game. So that could be critical for them. Same for even Playmore Esports. While they're technically in the playoffs right now, that one extra bonus point could make all the difference if certain things don't go their way in the final 2 weeks. Same for Chicago. Iron Bundle might be just a little too far out of it, unless it gets too crazy 6-0 sweeps in the final 2 weeks. And I'll throw Ceruledge as kind of outside looking in. It has a KDR of 7. If Goldoa gets a couple Ceruledge sweeps, maybe that extra bonus point could come back for him.
Hey, we saw that week 1. He could do it.
It is possible. That's why I threw it on there. Absolutely.
Yeah. His team is balanced enough to do it. I mean, in tandem with the Garchomp and the Zapdos, he knows his strengths. He knows how to play it well. Ceruledge could definitely basically be a menace to every team, any team, to play in the last 2 weeks.
Absolutely. So that's kind of the outlook on offensive MVP, and we're going to look at defensive MVP, which admittedly is a pretty short list. So we have Meowscarada, which is so weird to think, because it's not a defensive mon, but technically it has not fainted once this season and appeared 6 times. So it was number 1. Clodsire is number 2 with 6-1, so it's 5. That's also by the Bullet Punch Club, though. So they have 2 in the top 2. And then Iron Treads and Skeledirge, Borussia and Atlanta respectively, with 8 appearances and 4 faints. My analysis is the Bullet Punch Club basically have defensive MVP locked up. However, it is possible, with some crazy good luck for Borussia or Atlanta, they could, if they bring Iron Treads and Skeledirge to the final 2 games and not have them get KO'd, they might be in contention for it if the Bullet Punch Club brings both mons both weeks and they faint. So just a reminder, if GADR, or games appeared to death ratio, is equal, the mon with more games appeared would end up winning the tiebreaker.
I was going to ask you about that, if that was how that worked. It's good to know, because obviously that matters in the grand scheme of things, because I was about to say, or think to myself, he could just not bring those Pokemon, and he could still lock up that those bonus points.
Yeah, I mean, it's not like the Bullet Punch Club need it, but you know what?
No,
they could. You know what? If they want the bye, maybe it would help if they lose one game. Let's say in the last 2 weeks, that extra point could make the difference. So,
but him stealing a point for himself could then block out a team that he could look at and go, oh, I really don't want to face that threat. Or I really want to face that coach because they gave me problems during the regular season, right? Him getting a point or keeping a point for himself could really be a detriment because of how much these bonus points matter to any other coach who maybe he doesn't need it, but they definitely do.
For sure, for sure. All right. I think we've pretty much covered it all. You know, we have a half-hour-long podcast here, and I think we've covered pretty much all the good aspects of the GBA Season 10, so I think we're ready to close it out. I'm really excited to see the last 2 weeks and to see how the playoffs unfold. I don't know if you have any closing thoughts.
No, this has been really cool to talk to you and obviously get back into enjoying the GBA the past few years without any sort of draft league period was kind of sucky. I enjoy that this, not just our league, but leagues in general coming back with the changes in the meta and the 60-minute timers again, and it's nice to see. I mean, if nothing else, the GBA established a framework for other people to enjoy not only this league and all the other popular leagues that are out there, the ones that people can watch their favorite content creators compete in, but then to do it themselves. And I think at the end of the day, that matters just as much as our league or anyone else's league. So this has been really cool to see.
Absolutely, and it's been a joy to watch unfold myself as someone running it, and also definitely want to thank Joel. Wish he could have been here today, but the dude's been killing it behind the scenes, so just wanted to give a shout out to him for also running the GBA with me.
Yeah, you guys have done a great job. I applaud all of your efforts, as many as they have been, and it's been, you guys have done a killer job at establishing everything from getting the coaches in, getting the rule doc set up, watching the games, tracking the games, stats, graphics, everything. You guys did an immaculate job, and as someone who did what you guys are doing now, I get it. It's a lot, but it's impressive.
Thank you. No, I speak for both of us and say we really appreciate it. So, and we hope everyone else has enjoyed getting to watch the season. So, alrighty, I'm ready to close out. Hope you guys have a fantastic day. Thanks for listening. Week 9 matches are going up next Sunday, so be on the lookout. Have a good one.
Have a good one, guys.